Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. I am excited to share some news with you today. Actually on a subject that a lot of you have been asking me about over the last really year or so, and that is about raising quail on the homestead. For those of you who have been following along for a long time, you know that I used to raise quite a few quail and I absolutely loved them. But about a year or so ago, we got to a point where when we first bought the second piece of property, things were just getting a little too overwhelming and something had to give, and for a while that had to be the quail. But no more. This past weekend I actually moved all of my quail supplies from the homestead down here to the farm and got everything set back up, and just yesterday I went and bought some quail from someone here in town, and I'm so excited to share them with you, show you what we have, and to get started raising quail again. Let's go over here in the barn and see what we have. All right, so we're in the barn. This is the quail cage, my original quail cage that I had back at the homestead. I moved this down. I've got everything set up. I've got their automatic water set up, the feeders that I love using, and you can see that we've got quite a few quail in here. I've actually picked up 12 quail, a variety of colors, which is what I'm excited about this time. In the past, I've only raised what are called the Pharaoh pattern of quail. These are all Coturnix quail, which is a Japanese quail. But in the past, I've only raised what are called Pharaoh, which are kind of the natural color. Let me see if I can find one of those to show you. Yes. So this brown is what would be considered a Pharaoh, and that is kind of a natural or wild color for the Coturnix quail. Now, we have quite a few other colors in here as well. You can see we have some of the white quail. This one's got just a little bit of brown on his head, but this would still be considered a white. Now, none of these are pure, and to be honest, I don't care, because we're just raising them for meat. You know, we'll be hatching eggs and breeding, but we're not doing this for any kind of show quality or anything like that. I just think it's kind of fun to have all the different colors this time. Here's one here, eating out of the feeder right now. Let me see if I can grab this one. This is what's called a tuxedo, for obvious reasons. Looks like he's wearing a tuxedo. We've got some light colored ones that I believe are called roux. Let me get those for you. I just think it's fun to have all the different colors. So this light color, this would be what's considered roux. And then I'm not really sure what this pattern is called. I'm sure some of you guys will know, but I just thought it was really neat looking. So now the really cool thing is that a lot of these quail are considered celadon quail, which means that they lay blue eggs. So some of them will lay the standard brownish quail eggs, but probably about half of these are going to lay blue eggs. We actually got, I think, 5 eggs today, and about half of, or I think 3 out of the 5 were the blue eggs. So that is really cool. We should have here 10 hens and 2 roosters, if all of my sexing was right when we did it. So I'm excited. We should be getting, quite a few eggs every day. We're going to start incubating them soon, and we are officially back in the quail business. All right, let me show you guys some of the equipment that I'm using inside of here. The first thing are the feeders that I use. These feeders I've been making for years, actually from the very first time I started raising quail all the way back in Arizona. And this type of feeder, if you raise quail, you know, they're probably the messiest eater out of any animal we have on the farm, because what they like to do is they like to get a mouthful of food, and then they shake their head, and they basically just spit out 90% of what's in their mouth, and it goes everywhere. So there's a ton of waste. So with the types of feeders that I like to use, which are these right here, let me get one out. so nobody jumps. I make these just out of, you know, these storage containers. And I've got videos on how to make these. You can look back and find those videos. But basically, you just cut, you know, you just drill holes, and I put these little pieces of PVC pipe, little discs of PVC pipe in here. That gives the quail somewhere to put their head. So they stick in here, they can get a mouthful of food. Even if they shake it around, it goes right back inside of the feeder, and there's really no waste at all. This system works awesome. The other thing that I am a big fan of with quail is automatic waterers. Now, there's several different types that you can use, but the kind that I have found to be the most effective are these kind right here that you can see at the back, which is like a little cup. Don't escape. Go over there. A little cup, and basically this cup holds just a little bit of water, and when they peck at it, it lets a little bit more water into the cup, and it just always has a good supply of fresh water for them. This is working just off of a 5-gallon bucket that I have up here at the top. It doesn't need much water pressure at all. This 5-gallon bucket is plenty of water to feed that, and it gives them a good supply of water and no problem at all. Now, during the winter, I do like to use a different kind, and I actually have one of these in here. Normally, during warm weather, I wouldn't have one of these in here, but these guys weren't used to this type yet. So I put this in just to make sure that they can figure out the other water. But during the winter, I like to just use these mason jar waterers, because I can come out several times a day. I've got, you know, a lot of those, and I can just, you know, switch them out several times throughout the day. And that way it just keeps it nice and clean. And those are super cheap. I think at the feed store here in town, they're less than $2 a piece. So pick up a dozen of them, and you can, you know, always have fresh ones in the house waiting for them. So this is my system. I did put some lights up here as well, because our days are starting to get short already. During the, you know, summertime, we're getting dark at 9 o'clock. We're already down to about 7:30 that it's getting dark. So I do have these lights up here. I'll be adding timers on these so that they get plenty of light, so they'll keep laying all winter long. Now, a couple things that I've done different with this cage from when I had it at the homestead. For those of you who watched me build this cage, I actually have a video on how to build this. I've added a door here in the middle. I used to only have these two doors here that kind of open out. And of course, all of the quail like to lay their eggs right here in the middle, which made it very hard to reach over the feeders and into the middle to get the eggs. So I've added a door right here. So now I have access to basically the entire cage very easily. The other thing that I've done that I've never really known what to do to solve this problem, but I don't like the quail just being right on the cage wire all the time. So I've tried rubber mats and things like that, and it just hasn't worked out. So what I've decided to do is just start putting hay in this end of the cage. That gives them a nice soft, you know, kind of pillow almost mat to get off of the hay or off of the wire. And several times a week I can just come and change this hay out. They have a good time scratching around it, and it gives them a little more natural feel. And I just think that that's going to be a good system, and we can just change it out, compost that, have some good compost, and it's a win for the quail and a win for us. Now, if you're new to raising quail, you may be wondering why this cage is so short. A nice long cage, but not very tall. That's actually intentional, and it's something that's very important for quail. Quail have a tendency, when they get scared by a loud noise outside, or you coming in to collect eggs or something like that, they have a tendency when they get scared to jump straight up in the air. If you have a tall cage, they'll actually jump up in the air and break their neck by hitting the top of their cage. So that is really why it's so important to have a short cage. This cage is only about 12 inches from the floor to the ceiling. So even if they do jump, it's not enough for them to get enough speed to hurt themselves. So this type of cage, by being short, prevents that. It keeps them nice and safe. You know, we've designed this cage to be long, gives them a lot of floor space, a lot of ventilation. The area where this is located in the barn is covered on, you know, the back side and the roof, but pretty much open on the ends, and they get a nice flow of air through here all day. It's going to be a great place for them, and I think they're going to be really happy here. So there you go, you guys. I am so excited to be back in the quail business. You know, I really think of quail personally as just kind of a hobby for myself. A lot of the other animals on the homestead I feel like are something we really rely on, like the cows and the pigs and even the chickens. Those are things that are, you know, more utilitarian around the homestead. But the quail, I just think they're fun. I enjoy raising them. They supply a good source of meat and eggs for the family. I'm never going to raise 1,000 a year. I'm never going to get that big. I'm going to raise what I want when I want. I'm going to try to keep it as fun as I can this time around. But you guys, quail are something that if you haven't raised, you should definitely check into. I highly suggest them, especially if you're in more of a urban area, because you can really raise a lot of these and get some good meat for your family. All right, now we're out in our orchard area. You can see the ducks and the chickens behind me. And you may be wondering why they're not in their moat area. The moat area that we created for them last winter, which is a double fence system all the way around this area. Why are they free ranging inside of the orchard area? Well, there are always things going on around the homestead, kind of behind the scenes that you guys don't always see in real time. This past week was one of those things. We actually had a pretty big project done on the homestead this past week, something that we've been needing for a long time that we are so excited to finally have accomplished. And that is that we had water lines installed strategically around the homestead, around the farm, so that we can get water to our animals, to our gardens, and to the greenhouse, and so that over winter we don't have to be hauling buckets of water all over the farm this winter like we did in the past. It also means that one of my biggest pains in the butt doesn't have to happen next summer, and that is moving about 700 feet of garden hose out of the way every time I need to mow the lawn. I think I can open a used garden hose store, garden hose thrift store after we're done with this project, because I probably own enough garden hose to get from here to Wisconsin. All right, let's take a little walk over this way. I'm going to show you what type of hydrants we put in and kind of explain to you how all of this works. All right, you can see that we had to move both of the hoop coops kind of out into the middle of the orchard area while they were here working on this project. Normally, they'd be right up against this fence. The company that we use to put these water lines in actually have a really cool machine that they come in, and it basically trenches and lays the pipe all at one time, and they can just kind of drive around and install the water lines. Now, there's still a lot of work afterwards to install the hydrants and everything, but you can see, I mean, yes, there's some damage to the ground, but for the most part, this dirt is just laying on top of the grass, and after we get a rain, this is going to wash right back, and you're barely going to tell they were even here. So let's go down here, and I'm going to show you this first hydrant that they put in, which is the first one right here. So this is the type of hydrant that we've had installed in, like I said, different places around the homestead. In this orchard area, we actually had 3 of these installed, and we did that on purpose because, as we've been telling you guys for about the past year, our plan for this area is to divide this into 3 sections. This section over here, where this one is going to be for gardens. We're having a section for just the fruit orchard, and then we're having a third section just for berries. So each of those sections will now have their own supply of water. Now, this type of hydrant is called a frost-free hydrant. Not all parts of the country have these or need these. We didn't really have many of these in Arizona because we never really got enough frost, or the ground never froze enough. But here where we get cold, and you guys who live in northern states probably already know about these, this is called a frost-free hydrant. So basically the way this works is when the handle is down, this is off, and when the handle is up, it's on. The way that this prevents from freezing over the winter is when you turn it off, all of the water that's up in this pipe actually drains back down and out the bottom of the pipe, and then there's no water here to freeze. It goes down below the frost line so that there's never any water to freeze. Now, obviously, we won't be able to be running garden hoses like this over the winter, but we will be able to use these to fill buckets and things at, like I said, different parts of the homestead, so we don't have to be carrying things so far over the winter. So this is going to make life so much easier having these installed. I can finally wind up all of those garden hoses, and we can get a lot more strategic about getting water to the animals and all of the things that we're growing. I think this is the hydrant that I'm the most excited about, because this hydrant is going to be able to allow us to have water to the greenhouse even in the winter. I talked a little bit about this in some of our previous videos when I was showing how the irrigation system is going to work in the greenhouse, but I don't think it made a lot of sense to a lot of you until we can actually show you now that the hydrant is here. So currently, in order for me to hook up the irrigation in the greenhouse, which here's where the hose hooks up to feed all of the lines inside of the greenhouse, I would need to run a hose all the way from our well house, which is about 300 feet away. Now, because we have this hydrant here, I can make myself just about a 10-foot hose, run it from right here at this hydrant over to this connection right here, and that's the only piece of hose that I need. So when I'm done watering for the day, I can turn that hydrant off, have a nice frost-free option there. I can disconnect that hose on each side, bring it in the greenhouse. There'll be no water in the hose, and it'll all drain out, and that won't freeze up either, and we can just use that all winter long. Now, there may be some water that stays in these lines inside the greenhouse. I do have it so that I can open the far end of this, and because the greenhouse is at a little bit of a slope, it should all drain out, but if there is a little water, it's really not that big of a deal. If it freezes overnight, there's not a single day during the winter that this greenhouse doesn't get above freezing during the day. So we may have to adjust our watering times a little bit so that we're hitting that time of day when it's above freezing and the lines have thawed out, but there's never going to be a time where we can't water. This is another thing that I'm super excited about as far as these water lines go. Now we're running out of daylight, so I'll try to keep this pretty quick. But you can see behind me our pond. This is one of the ponds that we have here on the farm, but this is by far the biggest pond. This is the one that I'm hoping to someday turn into a fishing pond. It's big enough, it's deep enough, and I should be able to have fish in there. But right now, we have to allow the cattle to get in there because it's the only source of water for them when they're over in this area. Not anymore. Now that we have these water lines installed, we actually ran one down here so that we can have a water tank for the cattle down in this area, which means at some point, probably not anymore before winter, but at some point I can get busy fencing this pond off to keep the cattle out of it, and we can finally start using it as a fishing pond. Now, along with this paddock, we've actually had a hydrant put in every paddock that we move the cows to, so that from now on we don't have to rely on ponds at all. Last summer and this summer, in two of our other paddocks where we have much smaller ponds, those ponds actually went dry and we weren't able to keep the cattle in there during those times. So by having these hydrants all over the place now, we can actually move the cattle where we want them when we want to, versus having to rely on the rain for those times of year when we have kind of a drought. Well, looks like they heard me talking, which probably means that they think I'm bringing them some grain, but we only do that in the morning. So they might think that they're about to get a treat, but they're not going to get one tonight. Let's go a little closer. Our cattle are actually pretty friendly, so we can get and talk to them and pet them, but they're not as friendly as our dairy cow. Hey girls, how are you? Well, I see all of the cows and their calves, but I don't see Tex coming yet. He usually tends to be more toward the back. This paddock is actually where we're going to plan to separate Tex over the winter. At least that's our current plan. We've got a little bit of fence that we need to fix to make sure he's not going to have a way to escape, but we think our plan is to keep Tex in this area over the winter, and that's another reason why these water lines were so needed yet before winter, because otherwise we'd have to be out here chopping holes in the ice in order for him to drink over the winter, and that's not a fun job, especially when it's really cold out. Oh, there's Tex all the way at the back. And of course, here on the other side of the driveway, Rose and Babe had to come say hi. Rose is our Jersey cow. She's the one that we're currently milking. And Babe is her calf, who's about 8 months old now. So she's still got quite a while before we'll ever start milking her, but we're excited for that day to come. We've also installed some water lines over on this side for them so that we can have a waterer over here that we don't have to run 300 feet of garden hose to. So you guys, that is some of the exciting things that are happening around the homestead. Like I said, there's always things kind of happening in the background that we can't show you as things are happening, either because it's work that we're having done and not everybody wants to be on YouTube, or it's just things that we need to accomplish. But we're always excited to share with you the improvements that we're making and show you how we're continuing to learn to live a better life out here in the country. Hey, if you're enjoying our channel and you're enjoying our content, I hope that you'll hit that subscribe button before you leave. Don't forget, as always, the absolute best way that you can help us is by sharing our videos on all of your social media. And until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care, and God bless.